Welcome to Pivot and Thrive. I'm Karin McCarthy, founder of Vermont Collaborative Circle and home of the Pivot and Thrive community, a community resource for entrepreneurs dedicated to making Vermont the place where businesses and families thrive. In our Pivot and Thrive series, we offer learning, networking, showcase, and collaboration market opportunities. We're so excited to bring small business owners together so we can make better informed decisions about running a business in Vermont. Before we begin today, I'd like to recognize the Abenaki Nation, on whose traditional land we're having this discussion. We acknowledge their rich cultural history and honor them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. And this is being recorded, so we'll ask that you stay on mute during the session, and we'll have the opportunity for a Q&A at the end. And I know that Chelsea is looking forward to hearing what questions and ideas you have for implementing this work in your life. Without further ado, thank you so much, Chelsea Frisbee, for joining us today. Chelsea merges the practical with the spiritual to help people move from the stuck to the unstuck, from lost to delightfully on a journey. She's a coach, a spiritual mentor, a writer, and poet who loves using earth-based spirituality as a thread that weaves everything together. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Karin. I'm really excited to be with you today. And I also thank you for offering that honoring of the Abenaki land that you're on. I am in upstate New York on the land of Haudenosaunee people. And this has become a really important practice for me to start doing. So I really appreciate you bringing that into the space. And I am just thrilled to be able to spend the next hour talking about some things that are really close to my heart and that I found are really just useful in everyday life, especially when it comes to work and business. So my intention really for the next hour is to share some invitations for how to slow down and deepen and really build a spiritual practice as a way to support your work or your business or your life. So whether you have a really well-established spiritual practice already, maybe yoga, meditation, journaling, prayer, or if you're just kind of curious about what that looks like, what I mean when I say spiritual practice, you're definitely in the right place. And I'm really excited to be here with you all and think that you'll get a lot out of the time together. So just a couple of logistical pieces. Make sure you've got like a pen and paper handy in case we're going to be doing some journaling on the workshop here today. And also, I don't think he's going to bother me, but I do have a cat who gets really into Zoom meetings sometimes, and so if he'll start like scratching his little head on the monitor. If you notice me like throwing things or shaking, that's what's happening. His name is Jiminy. He's a very, very dear friend of mine, so he's my helper for these. And to get started, we're gonna just be practicing a little bit of what this actually is, right? Of taking the time to slow down and be intentional. So I want to start with a quick little bit of a guided meditation into some silent meditation just to ground us in the space together for the next hour. So I'll just invite you to get comfortable. Maybe close your eyes or soften your gaze. And start taking some deep breaths into your body. Using this as an opportunity to remember that we have a body. Bring your awareness down to what you can feel supporting you, underneath you. Maybe it's your feet on the ground, contact that your back or your seat has with the chair below you. Notice where your breath is without judgment. Maybe you notice it coming in and out of your nostrils, or the rise and fall of your chest, coming in and out of your belly. Just take a few minutes here in silent meditation, and then I'll bring us back. From this place of connecting to breath, connecting to your body, I want yourself to answer the question, what brought you here today? What's your intention for the next hour? Just let it kind of bubble up. Maybe it's just to slow down. Maybe you're coming with curiosity. Maybe you're looking to deepen. Whatever it is, start to open your eyes and just take a minute and kind of staying in this meditative place, jot down anything that came through for what your intention is here today. I'll invite you to come back to the screen in front of you, to the room around you. And I'd love to hear from a few of you before we get started, just what came up, what drew you to this space, and what your intent or what your intention might be for this hour together. You can just off mute and share. Love to hear some voices.
I'll warm us up. I am looking to have a deeper feeling of connection with sense of purpose, and reminding myself that rituals can help me to stay on track with priorities, and in so doing have a strong foundation for growth.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, deeper connection to purpose. I feel that.
I would really like to help cultivate and more mindful spiritual practices throughout my day, and how to work them into every moment that I'm working through, whether it's work or life or anything like that.
Yeah, I feel that like as this thread, right, that's sort of always available to us. And whether it's we're eating or we're offering services to others or we're looking at our to-do list, like how to bring that sense of connection and practice into it. Yeah, thank you, Caitlin.
I also wrote something very similar to Caitlin, and my intention is really to slow down and have an integration of a spiritual practice or mindfulness inside of daily routines, be it work, alone time. Yeah.
Thanks, Nicole. I love that word, integration. I've been thinking about that a lot recently. Well, and I was like, why am I here? I wrote down something too, because I really believe in the power of intention, and like, yeah, that it's just really important to name that. And so for me, this is a really great opportunity to continue to get really clear about what are like my gifts and my purpose in being here, and sharing it has been like sharing it and inviting other people into the spaces with me as I'm doing that work for myself has been one of the most powerful tools that I've had in doing that. So that's part of why I was inspired to offer this today. And also I was sharing with Karen before we started that often I found that like when I lead things like this, it becomes an opportunity to take my own advice or like to take my own medicine. And so this morning I was feeling really overwhelmed by like, you know, an unending to-do list and all of these things that were like calling for my attention and, you know, getting ready for this workshop. And then I was like, oh, right, slow down. Like if I'm really gonna embrace this, then I'm gonna go for a walk in the sun because it's 40 degrees. And you know, I also did some like practical things on advancing what I'm working on right now. But then I did yoga, and so I'm coming to you now, like trying to really embody this how do you do this? And so I'll be sharing along the way just some of what I've learned about it. So before we kind of get into some of those nitty gritty pieces, of like the how and what does this actually look like, I did want to just introduce myself a little bit further in the context of spiritual practice. So I'm a spiritual mentor and a coach and a writer, and I weave a lot of that together into my work. If you had asked me a few years ago if I was satisfied with my life, I probably would have said yes. I was in a very different place. I was living in Vermont. I was working for a nonprofit that I loved, supporting sustainable agriculture. I had a community, and like I felt kind of like this is what my life is right now. And deep down, I really longed for something with more purpose and like a spiritual element to it. And as life sometimes does, I was given an opportunity to find more purpose and spirit, but not in the way that I would have chosen. My mom passed away of pancreatic cancer about 5 years ago after a very short 5 months of battling it. And just sort of catapulted me into a time of incredible grief and loss, and like an opportunity to totally reorient my life. Not even an opportunity, kind of a push into really figuring out how to exist in a different way. And it was a very challenging time. I started having a lot of health issues. I like stopped being able to digest my food. I fell into anxiety and panic attacks, and I spent a lot of time looking for answers from outside of myself. It was like looking for the next holistic practitioner that could help me, you know, find healing in these different areas that I was struggling with. And it wasn't working. And I was really just in a tough spot, and essentially ended up leaving my partner and reorienting my life, like moving away from Vermont, moving back to my hometown. And what sustained me through all of those changes and all of the learning and the wisdom a lot that like ended up coming to me along the way really was spiritual practice, and like having an anchor throughout my days just to kind of get through the challenges, but also having an anchor that over the years has provided me with this like tie towards more purpose, and really living deeply with meaning. That is absolutely not a coincidence that this is coming out of this experience of losing my mom, because part of what that gave me an opportunity to do was to really look at like what, you know, life is short, right? Like what is, how do I take advantage of this one life that I have to live, and do it in a way that feels really good on all levels, you know, a spiritual level, sort of a practical life level. And so, you know, that the spiritual practice really has been a thread, or sometimes like just an anchor or something to hold on to through a lot of those changes. And what I've come to is that part of my work and calling is how to, for myself and for others, merge the practical with the spiritual to help myself and help others live their deepest purpose. And so that's really what, that's kind of exactly what we're going to talk about today, right? Is how do you merge like the mystical, the everyday sacred, the spiritual with the practical, like the structures that you need to find enough discipline, but not too much to be too rigid, to really allow for this what I've found to be a really amazing kind of balance that can happen between the two. So I often work with women specifically in women's circles or book clubs or online group courses. I also work one-on-one with women and men through coaching, spiritual mentorship, and also curated solo retreats at a cabin in Vermont. And I have a dream one day of opening a retreat center here in New York, where I live, to bring people to connect deeply with place and the land, and just the incredible resource that we have living on the earth here. So stay tuned for that in a few years. But what I want to really dive into, so that's just a little background of like where I'm coming from when I talk about spiritual practice, and how my own life experience has informed now what I'm offering to help other people with. And what I'm going to talk about is really just some simple invitations for how to slow down, how to deepen, how to bring those threads into our everyday lives. So we'll talk about, just kind of go back to the basics of making sure that we're talking about what is a spiritual practice? What does that mean? Why is it even important right now? And what your relationship is to that. So we'll do a little bit of journaling and potentially discussion if we have time. So, this is something that I love talking about. I could talk about forever. So I'm going to share as much as I can in the next however many minutes we have left. But just know that there are also opportunities to go deeper if you're interested in continuing the conversation. So spiritual practice, what do I mean when I say spiritual practice? Spiritual, for me, it's really investigating like a deeper meaning or purpose. This looks different for everybody. For some people that they use language like God or the divine, or, it's a very religious part. For other people, it's more, talking about the universe, talking about purpose and meaning and higher self, and, these higher versions of ourselves that we can be looking for or trying to uncover. So I really want to frame this in the context of like being outside of institutional, traditional religion, and really that it's, I'm coming from my own personal background is with experience practicing Christianity and Buddhism and animism. And so a lot of like what I think about in terms of spiritual practice is in that lens, but that it's, I want to be clear that like, I'm not promoting those particularly for you, and that this is really about what resonates for you. So with anything, whether it's the spiritual part or like the practical application, taking what I offer as an invitation and trying it on and seeing how it feels for you and finding what works for you is really what will serve you best. And then so a practice, right, is something that's done with intention on a regular basis. And it makes it sound so simple, but I think the beauty comes, like the beauty of spiritual practice is how to merge both of those without letting it go like too far into being rigid and like sort of being like another thing to do. I've definitely found myself, sometimes it's like, oh man, like if I really break it down to like it's like the journaling and then this is my life, journaling and meditating and like walking and, remembering to thank the earth for the food, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. And when there's this really great Venn diagram that I'm probably gonna get wrong. And so I might just point you to Google to look it up, but it's, one of the circles is discipline and the other circle is surrender. And in the middle is flow, right? And so I like to think about this in terms of a creative process, but I also really like to think about this in terms of spiritual practice of how to, that this merging is really like that part in the middle, that's where the magic is. So some examples of spiritual practice, journaling, meditation, intentional time in nature, yoga, prayer, singing, dancing, gratitude in general, chanting, gathering with other people. So it could be like going to a church or a synagogue, or recently I've been just experiencing a lot of really beautiful like Zoom spiritual gatherings, which they sort of are like their own thing. I don't even know how to call them, but with intention, it becomes a practice, right? Every week I show up for my community singing group, and it is part of my spiritual practice now. Studying sacred texts can be a spiritual practice. Any form of creativity or just like beauty making. And so that could be painting or drawing, writing, any sort of crafting. I think I'm not a parent, but I spent a lot of time with parents. I think parenting could be considered a spiritual practice, right? It's like, it's sort of, what are these things that call you into deepening and noticing. Another way that I like to think about it is like, what are you doing when you feel most alive or most connected? And then trying to build on that. So there's lots more examples of spiritual practice, but just to get us started with the conversation, that's where I'll leave that at. And I also just wanted to speak to, in this moment, why I think this is really important. Not just the slowing down part, but the bringing intentionality as we're all in a really unique moment in history, right? So I don't want to spend too much time talking about it because I feel like it can be a rabbit hole for energy sometimes. But these days we literally have the world at our fingertips, right? Information about pretty much any spiritual practice or tradition in the world is available to us. We could spend all of our time learning about anything in the world, right? It can be really easy to get overwhelmed. And I'm really interested in exploring the question of like, how do we use the information and like the opportunity that we have available to us in this world of like hyper connectivity to build meaningful, sustained spiritual practice. And I know for myself, it can be really easy to kind of stay on the surface, right? Of like I'll get into just scrolling on Instagram and like inspirational quotes that I really love and that like give me that moment of feeling connected and like purposeful. And then, I keep scrolling. And I mean, it's kind of the flaw with social media in a lot of ways, but they don't last, right? It doesn't like actually bring me into that. Sometimes it can be an opportunity to bring me into deeper connection, but other times it's just another like little thing that distracts me or pulls my attention away from something else. And we're in just some context for where we are spiritually as a society, especially in America. We've kind of been going away from spirituality and religion over the last few decades. So there was a Pew Forum study in 2019 that said that 26% of Americans have no religious affiliation. And that's a trend also among younger segments of the population, which is 40% of millennials. I'm not necessarily saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just kind of drawing attention to that. This is a change. If you think about generationally, in the last 100 years, let's say, just a shift in sort of our society, and that some of the questions, like these bigger questions, these deeper questions about like what sustains us as human beings, like what does give our lives meaning and purpose, what's our sense of connection to something beyond just like our own small lives. These are, I think, have become even more pressing, or like these deeper questions in the last year that we don't really have a lot of structure or deeply rooted and sustained tradition as individuals, I think. And then there's the pandemic, right? And so a lot of the disconnection and the uncertainty and fear and grief and change has made it really challenging, and also has given us an opportunity to slow down, right? And to reevaluate what's important in each of our lives and collectively. And I'm really aware that this, maybe you have this sense too, like this isn't just like a small blip and then like we're just going to get back to normal, right? That I think we're really being given an opportunity to think about how we live and imagine like a really different reality than the one that we've known up to this point. And we're being confronted every day with the fact that like life is short and nothing is for certain, and how do we take advantage of our purpose, our work, what we're meant to do here on the earth. And I think for people who are drawn to spiritual practice and to business, and to offering something to the world in a really practical, tangible way with our time, that this is just a really, really important topic right now. So, and that's what I love. That's what I love getting into, is like, how do you ground into ancient wisdom that's like in spiritual practice and ask the big questions and like call in all of our resources, whatever that looks like for you. For me, that's like connecting with ancestors and the earth and like singing and like using using this as an opportunity to sort of propel us forward individually and collectively into deeper meaning and purpose. So I'm gonna stop talking for a minute because I could talk about that for a long time. And we're gonna do just a brief journaling exercise that will help kind of ground you in where you are in this right now, and have a little discussion about it before moving into some of my like tips. I still haven't figured out how to talk about this, but some my invitations, that's how I talk about them, for how to bring some of this into your life. So get your pencil and paper out, and I'll give like 3 or 4 prompts, and they're meant to be places to start. You know, this is something you can come back to later and do more journaling on, but just kind of to get the juices flowing. So let's take a couple minutes on each one. The first one is, where do you fall right now, kind of on the spectrum of spiritual practice? Like, are there some practices that you're already doing on a regular basis that you know really sustain you? Are you just getting started? What do you know are like already supports you, but maybe you want to go deeper into? So just do a quick self-assessment of like your relationship to spiritual practice right now. Next question is, how do you want to feel in your life or your work or your business? Like, how do you want to feel right now? Or if it's not right now, going forward. You know, maybe you want to feel more connected or purposeful, supported, peaceful, alive. Maybe you just want to feel good. Just take some time and think about the feeling that you want to cultivate. And the next question is, what practices might support you in feeling that way? What practices might support you in feeling that way? And the last prompt here is, without, without committing to that practice necessarily, maybe if it was meditation, or, a daily walk or yoga, whatever it is, without fully committing to like, I'm going to do this for an hour every day for the next 7 days. Just what's the like tiniest step towards that, building that practice that you could start doing tomorrow? It could be, saying a prayer with your breakfast. It could be stretching before you get into the shower, just like the tiniest, most achievable baby step that you could imagine. And then I want you to like with your pen, kind of like circle what you just wrote and just literally draw a line, like an arrow back to why, like how you want to feel. And we're literally just like making a connection on the paper as a reminder, that this isn't just another thing to do, but that this is deeply connected to like this other layer, right? A deeper level of purpose and way of being. And I'd love to hear if anyone would like to share anything that came up in this little exercise before we keep going. We have a couple of minutes. I think we could hear from a few of you.
I will share some thoughts. First, thank you for sharing a little bit of personal background. I found that we're very similar in our paths, actually, but I just am really grateful that you were able to share that with us. But I'm fairly new to the practice. I think so. Beginning with the first question, it was really interesting to hear you talk about spirituality versus religion, because I grew up from a Catholic background. My family was very fiercely Catholic, and I never really connected with that, but I always felt a very strong pull towards spirituality outside of maybe the religious construct. So from a young age, I had journaled and written poetry, and that's kind of been my outlet of spiritual expression for myself. But recently have felt more of a pull towards maybe femininity and the divine feminine and connecting with women's groups. And so that is the beginning of my journey here. And then you asked, how do you want to feel in your life? And this is something that resonated deeply with me because I think that I'm kind of at this peak of burnout. I was a healthcare provider and I've been going nonstop forever. This is like the first break that I've taken. And especially after the pandemic, it's just like, but I am a giver by nature. And so that's really important to me, is to feel community connection. So how I want to feel in my life, I do want to feel more purpose inside of a career. I don't want to feel like I'm working for corporate, or just this constant burnout and this constant need to just go and not feel fulfilled. So, I want to feel more connected to a community, and I want to feel that I'm contributing or extending goodness into my community. Yeah, but those are some thoughts.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. I love hearing that, some of this resonates with you, and also just that, like, I don't know, I just get a warm, like a lot of warmth and connection from hearing where you are right now. And that, yeah, just thank you for sharing.
I can share. I'm looking. When we're talking about what I want to feel in my life and business right now, I'm really looking to cultivate that feeling of wholeness and oneness with everything. And the way that I was originally framing how I can do this was kind of taking a few mindful breaths and like allowing myself to really feel that openness and that oneness and that wholeness and that feeling of expansion, like when I think about it. But then I realized that I can also do that when I realize that my body's feeling tense or I'm holding tension or I'm just, I'm not relaxed in some way. And that just just taking a moment to allow my body to relax and to let my guard down. that can also be really helpful in that first step.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And what came to mind when you were talking was how much our bodies, like how much wisdom they hold, right? And that I've started to think about tension as an opportunity, like it's my body reminding me that I need to breathe, or that something needs to shift so that I don't feel that tension, and so there's a lot that goes into that, because first you need to be aware of it, right? Just starting to be like, oh yeah, how I feel when I start doing this, whether it's on an inner landscape or like in our physical body, it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to like fix that, but it does mean that that's an opportunity to think like, oh, where can I find more spaciousness? How can I connect to my breath? How can I connect to what's below the tension that will then allow me into that like expansive moment? Yeah, so I just really appreciate that, Caitlin. It's beautiful. And it also reminds me, something that's been coming up for me recently is our breath as a tool, that no matter where we are in our day, no matter what we're experiencing, whether it's something really joyful or something really challenging, that we always have this opportunity to breathe and connect and like allow for spaciousness, which I think then allows us to move forward in a way that is just different than if we forget. So that remembering that we have that tool. I'm going to keep moving just for an interest of time, but yeah, I was going to go into something else, but I'm gonna leave it there. So what are some tools that we have to implement some of this, how we want to feel, how to create these practices? I'm going to give you a couple of invitations in like the more spiritual realm, and then a couple in more of the practical realm. And so, the first invitation is to allow for spaciousness. It's like, oh yeah, right, that sounds simple. But that actually, when, and even just what I shared this morning about my experience this morning of like, oh yeah, taking 20 minutes to go for a walk, or like doing 10 minutes of yoga instead of like staring at my to-do list and trying to do the things, that there's a lot of value in, my coach Chrissy says, slow down to speed up, right? That when we give ourselves an opportunity to find space, whether it's just in a breath or if it's like in our day or in our life, that that's when there's a lot of really beautiful unfolding and deepening that then has time to happen, right? And that if we don't first give ourselves the time by slowing down and finding spaciousness, that a lot of that next step of like deeper work can't happen. So part of that is giving yourself time off. If you are, you know, a busy, as we all are, busy working human being at this point, carving out time for unstructured time. That could look like, you know, setting some boundaries around like, oh yeah, in the evening, I give myself these 2 hours to not be on screens, to unwind, to do my spiritual practice, whatever that looks like. It could be waking up earlier so that you have time for a morning routine that like sets you up and grounds you for the day. And that's something that I've found to be really, really helpful in my life. It could be, you know, saying, oh yeah, like on this time of the weekend, I don't work, I don't think about, you know, like sort of the business part of my life or the practical part of my life, but I give myself this space for creativity, for, you know, maybe it's just for wandering in the woods or whatever that practice is for you. That's my practice, needing space for wandering in the woods, but actually carving out the time for yourself to allow for that to happen is sort of a first step. Another invitation that I'll make is this idea of sacred play, which my spiritual mentor, Carolyn, introduced to me, which is like to really be curious that we're in, you know, as I said, we're in this time when there's all these different spiritual traditions available to us. There's a lot of information out there, and just being curious about like what calls to you, what you, what's supportive for you, like what you even consider to be spiritual is going to be, it's going to take some like playing around with, and just noticing like what things spark for you. So I've really enjoyed playing around with this of being like, you know, I really love singing, but I don't sing that often. And then noticing how my life has taken me now, as I've started being curious about this, into a much deeper practice that involves like developing voice and singing with other people, even though right now it's only over Zoom, and like starting to lead songs. And it's been this over 6 months now, I guess, just this thing that's happened because I gave myself permission to explore, to be really curious about how this might develop and support me. One thing that you can think about is like, what did you love doing as a kid? And notice if you're not doing those things anymore, how you might be able to introduce them into your life. So like for me, I spent a lot of my childhood roaming the woods and the fields and just being outside and like wandering. And so I've started giving myself, I don't do it every week, but I do have it on my calendar, 2 hours on Saturday mornings to wander in the woods, and like, you know, coming at it with some intentionality, but again, creating that space to allow for curiosity, to allow for playing around with what is this, how can this support me as an adult in doing this thing. So this can be really, really fun. And I've heard from other people that this is just like a really important part of their own development is giving themselves that permission. So I'm giving you permission to engage in spiritual or in sacred play and see what comes up for you. And then my last invitation in this realm is really about connecting back to the why, right? So this is what we did a little bit with that exercise of looking at how you want to feel and remembering that, you know, part of these practical practices are related to that. So like if I want to feel soft and relaxed and joyful, which is how I feel when I sing, then remembering that when I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh man, another thing in the evening, but I'm able to allow that connection to happen and then actually to be sustained by being closer to that why and to that purpose. That can be just a really powerful connection to make. Moving into the practical realm, some of the ways to start to implement some of this, my biggest pieces of advice is to start small. So what I've done in the last year and like really starting to build a foundation for my business and for my life is to take really small, tiny, tangible action steps that I'm honestly like pretty amazed that it works like that. So one of the things that I've done is I've wrote a book. It's sitting right here. It's called A Journey of Light. It's the first book that I've written. It was a collaborative effort with my mom's writing from the end of her life and my own writing from that time period. And so it's been like an emotional thing. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because it taught me so much about those little things that over the course of 2 years get strung together to be a really meaningful it's a practice, or it's what you're going to create in the world. So making it really achievable, what we did in that practice of making the tiniest possible thing that you can do to move towards how you want to feel. You're not going to just like all of a sudden wake up and have exactly what you're looking to create, whether it's for your business or your work or whatever that is. You can wake up though tomorrow and you can do that tiny little thing. Maybe it's meditating for 5 minutes. Maybe it's, exploring the next thing that is calling to you, just whatever that little thing is. And then you wake up the next day and you do it again. And so it's this, there's consistency. There's this idea of doing 1% better, which I really like. It's like, that's how I used to not be able to wake up on time, or I'd like hit my snooze a lot. And so how I started now consistently waking up at 6 a.m. is like little tiny steps towards that direction and finding accountability around it and kind of building as I go. The second invitation around deepening spiritual practice in like a very concrete way is to find community. So whether it's joining a group, I know for myself, meditation has been a really important practice for me. And I have a Zoom Buddhist meditation group that I've joined on Tuesday evenings that's like really allowed me to deepen my own practice outside of that. Asking a family member or friend to do something with you can be a really powerful way. You get that accountability, you have a shared experience. It also helps to deepen. And I also think we're just supposed to be doing this work together, right? We're community beings, we're human beings, and how can we support each other in asking some of these questions and doing some of the work at the same time? And then my last practical tip, I guess, is to let it be easy, right? It's like, instead of finding or like choosing something that isn't attainable, if you have a 20-minute commute to work, it's like, how can you build in a practice into that? If you are really busy because you're a parent and you're working, how can you, maybe it's just saying prayers with your kids, or starting a gratitude practice before you go to bed. These things of like looking at the structure of your life and how do we work with what's already there to find those places of deepening. So I'm very aware that we're almost at time, and I did want to take questions, but so that those are my invitations. And are there any questions right now before we close? And if there's not, that's fine too. I am available. I also love talking about this stuff. I'm available by email. I also offer free 30-minute sessions that really can dive deeper into like what your specific sense of purpose and like experience with spiritual practice is. So I'll just put in the chat here if you're interested in scheduling something, or just reach out to me by email. You can do that as well. Because the other, I guess the final like broad invitation that I'll make here is that finding accountability and support for this, whether, you know, you're just getting started in thinking about these things, or this is something you spend a lot of time thinking about, bringing in resource of other people to support you in it and to help hold you accountable to, you know, showing up for yourself in this way, and for yourself and your work and your business can be, speaking from experience here, that I have found that an incredible value in working with others on that. So I also, before I hand it over to Karin, just want to close with a poem, because I'm a writer and a poet, and I love to bring that just that medium into this space. So this is a poem that I wrote called Breaking Through. Now is the time for those among us who can connect to ancient wisdom, who find peace in grounded practice, who have access to radical healing, who can center themselves amidst the chaos, who love fiercely to share our gifts, and to lead, tapping into our deep knowing as together we become and create a new world. Breakdown leads to breakthrough. We are emerging, we are breaking through. Thank you so much for spending the hour together. Karin, did you want to say a few things?
Oh, absolutely. Chelsea, thank you so much for leading us in this session. Your invitations were just such beautiful, generative questions that I think help us to see a vision of ourselves in a future state where we feel more connected with our sense of purpose, and see ways that we can invite small change to experience big ripples of positivity and connection in our lives. So I just thank you so much for sharing your time and your talents with us. And certainly I hope that folks will reach out to you if they have questions. We as a community are always looking for ways to support people and business owners in particular in establishing ways that we can thrive, that we can show up as our best selves, and that we can create those breakthrough experiences where we are being positive change agents in our community. And so I think this is absolutely a cornerstone of that, and setting up intention and ways that we can support working in our purpose and sharing our talents with the world is so powerful and important. So thank you for that. We do have some workshops coming up that might be of interest. On Thursday at noon, we have a workshop about starting your podcast, tips and foundations for any entrepreneur. Next week, we have a workshop on Tuesday with Emily Ely called Solopreneur to CEO, How to Grow and When to Hire. And then on Thursday of the next week, we have a workshop, Add a Little Sunshine in Your Life Using Appreciative Inquiry, which I think all of these align really well with sharing your story, connecting with your sense of purpose, and sharing your gifts with your community, and developing and deepening your connection with other people in the way that you share your craft. So I hope you'll consider attending, and just thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing your time and your skills and talents with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been so nice to spend time with you all. And yeah, thank you for showing up and for sharing and for being open to connecting in this way.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.